Hi everyone, thanks very much for having me in here today. It's a sheer privilege to be sharing this virtual space with such eminent people. I'm here to really talk about my journey today from a TV journalist to a digital journalist. And it's a very long journey. It spans over 1 decade, and in fact, more than a decade, because it really starts from when I was in school. So, when I was in school, like many young people, I really thought that I'll put the skills that I have to good use. Of the skills that I had, I was good at writing, I was good at speaking, and I thought that I can either be a politician or be a journalist. And obviously, journalism was the better option, the better half between the two. So it wasn't just that, it was also the fact that I, from very start in my life, was very sensitive to things happening around me. I wanted to tell stories of the people. I wanted to give voice to those who cannot have a voice or who do not get a voice of their own, to the unheard, the outcast, the marginalized. And from very early on, having a strong sense of right and wrong, and with the skills that I had, I decided that I will be a journalist. Fast forward a couple of years later, in 2014, I enter mainstream media as a TV news journalist, and things take a turn, but not for good, for worse. A lot of experience comes in the form of reporting and in the form of anchoring and in the form of writing. But there are three really key takeaways under which I can sum up my entire experience of TV journalism in the country today. Number one being, you're not really helping the people. If you are a TV journalist, you're not really helping the people. You're only helping the powerful. When I was a part of the 24/7 news cycle as a TV journalist, we were often running around stories that really did not matter to the people. They had little to no significance in the life of the people. These were stories about either what politicians said, what they were about to do, the elections that are impending, etc., etc. Not much value add really for what the common man is going through. So it dawned on me really early on that you're not really helping the people, something that you're taught, when you're a student of journalism, or something that you tell yourself when you are trying to be a budding journalist, that this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to help the people. You really don't end up doing that. You really don't really end up helping the people. The second learning that dawned on me was that it really doesn't matter what's in public interest as long as it's of the interest to the public. Well, that essentially means that public interest is secondary. Who really cares about COVID, deaths, unemployment, poverty, hunger? Those are not cool issues. The public really doesn't get too excited about it. It's very unlikely for you to be able to sit down with someone and tell them that the country is not doing well economically, that the country is not doing well politically. But it's relatively easy for you to tell someone about a celebrity, about their favorite Bollywood personality, about people they follow, the influencers, their life, their drug habits, etc., etc. So it doesn't really matter if something is in public interest as long as it's of the interest to the public. That will form the agenda of news, and that is essentially what you're going to see on your screens every other day. There, that's where you draw the boundary, not of public interest, but of interest to the public. And lastly, the third big takeaway that I had was that what public deserves to know uh, is not your call, but that of your editor. What public deserves to know, or what is in, what public deserves to be knowing is not your call. And you may think that the public deserves to know something, but your editor may disagree, and it'll really not see the light of the day. And this came in, at a time when I was trying to do some very important stories about cow vigilantes in the country, for that matter. And the story was being reported from a state that my editor at the time thought does not really needs to be told, the story that doesn't really needs to come out from a state that does not need any more public scrutiny. So I remember as a young reporter going to a state, a nearby state, I'll just give you that hint, from Delhi, And I went there and I shot a story about how cow vigilantes were out on streets, and in connivance with the local authorities, they were they were hitting people on a daily basis. They were standing guards and they were acting de facto police like. And as an acting police, they were hitting who they had to hit, they were killing the people who had to be killed, and they were literally lynching. And I had that on camera, but my editor at the time decided that no, the public doesn't really deserve to know this. And there was no reason as to why the public doesn't deserve to know this. It was enough that the story should not go out. It was enough to kill the story, and so the story was killed. Those learnings took a time to uh, come their way and to change my course of life in a 360-degree manner. 2019 is the year I remember, February 2019 to be particular. I've had enough by then, and I leave TV for good. As I tell myself back then, I'm not sure if I will be back or not, but I leave TV for good and I start my journey as a digital journalist. And in the last 3 years now, since I've been a digital journalist, things have been different. And here are the three takeaways that I've had as an independent journalist, as a digital journalist, as someone who's now has who now has the power to tell the stories they like. A, it really it really is important for you as a journalist to be able to hold the powerful accountable. And that power is given to you if you are an independent journalist in the country today. In India, if you are an independent journalist, if you are a digital journalist, you still have the luxury of telling the story as is. You have the luxury of holding the powerful people accountable, of asking them the questions, the right kind of questions, the right manner of questions, and not just those who are at the helm of power, but also those who are in the opposition. Because remember, if the opposition in a country, in a democracy, is not robust, the country is not going to do well. So, the digital journalism that I practice today gives me that opportunity. And that's my big takeaway. Number one is that it's important for you to not think twice before asking questions of the powerful people. It's important for you to not think twice before holding the powerful accountable. But then there are other takeaways, and the most interesting takeaway perhaps is that it's not if it's not interesting to the powerful, and if it's not interesting to the public, it still is a story, right? If it doesn't necessarily have to be an entertainment story. It doesn't necessarily have to be about a politician's son, or a Bollywood actor's son or a daughter, about their rave parties, about their drug habit, about their deaths, and about their life. It can be really about the downtrodden. It can be about the marginalized. It can be about that Dalit who was beaten up for his sheer audacity, beaten up for his sheer audacity to sit in front of men of upper caste and eat food in a marriage ceremony. A woman who is outcast because she decides to go against her parents and study, because in her community, women are not allowed to study beyond a certain grade. For that man who gets beaten up on the road because he belongs to a certain marginalized community, right? Where men are beaten up and made to chant Jai Shri Ram in broad daylight, or sing national anthem for that matter in a riot like situation. So, this journalism that I practice has given me that luxury of telling stories that may not be necessarily interesting but are in public interest. That may not necessarily be about the powerful people, about the influential people, but really about the people whose stories deserve to be out there. And my third interesting takeaway is that performance is secondary to importance. Often when I was in TV, we would only be chasing stories that would give you TRPs. We would be chasing stories that are likely to make headlines and that other channels are likely to follow. But when you are a part of a digital media scenario, uh, it's not necessary that the story will give you great numbers, that will give you great unique views. But as long as it's important, it deserves to be told. Performance is secondary to importance of a story. To give you an example of a lot of environment journalists in this country who are doing some really great, good work, and they're acting in their best capacity to fulfill their commitment to the environment, the pollution, the industries that are polluting the riverbeds, the industries that are polluting perhaps the air in this country, and despite very, very dire and difficult circumstances, are thriving today with the support of few and very few people in public, because well, environment stories do not necessarily interest all, and especially not many people that I've come across. So it doesn't really matter if something is popular, it doesn't really matter whether everybody's talking about it, and it doesn't really matter whether you're going to get a lot of audience. As long as you're doing the right kind of journalism, digital media has opened, the independent journalism has opened that avenue for you, because your interest align with the interest of the people and not with the interests of the corporate that fund you. And the reason why all this is happening, if you may ask, is because a lot of independent journalists, as I see today, they are acting in interest of the public without dependency on a big corporate to fund them, without dependency on a big firm to give them money, without dependency on a political party to give them money, and therefore allowing them to do the kind of stories they want to do, and allowing them to tell the stories which are important for the people today. All in all, it's been about 3 years that I've been an independent journalist, and there is more that I've done in 3 years than what I've done in the last 5 years before that when I was in TV. I don't know whether I'll be back, and I don't know whether there'll be more platforms that will allow you to do good journalism tomorrow, especially mainstream platforms. And I don't think digital or internet today is less mainstream than TV or media. But I can tell you what's changing. People are learning to trust independent journalists more. People are learning to put their money where the mouth is, and therefore you'll see a lot of independent journalists thriving now with the help of public support, raising funds from their audience, from their viewers. And this is a paradigm shift. This is likely to continue. The only way for the mainstream to perhaps redeem itself is to know that they operate for public. Public doesn't operate for them, and maybe really start taking up responsibility for the content they put out. All in all, I think I'm going to end with a food for thought, and that is, if you are a journalist out of the necessity to tell people stories, if you're a journalist because you think journalism is the fourth pillar of democracy and it's about putting people's voices out there, it's about time you dwell deeper on the stories that you've done in the last few years of your career, and ask yourself whether you're doing right by it. Thank you very much.